Good morning. I think we're going to start. So if you'd please take your seats. Okay, we're going to get underway. If everyone could please take their seats. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Susan Bell with the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. We have had a rich and demanding schedule and agenda. We've had an opportunity to get to know one another and to consider the merits of public-private partnerships to advance social goals. Like Jane, I encourage you to take the forum home with you because the conference is just the beginning of a larger learning process of developing increasingly effective strategies for giving and for change. If you liked yesterday, you'll love today. This morning, I have the honor of introducing a man whose commitment to global philanthropy is well known throughout the Bay Area and the world. In 1951, Richard Goldman and his late wife established the Richard and Rhoda Goldman Fund to support charitable organizations primarily in the San Francisco Bay Area. Their giving was to organizations devoted to children and youth, the elderly, education, the environment, violence prevention, and Jewish community affairs. Although the portfolio was and remains diverse, the Goldman Fund has become best known internationally for its efforts to preserve the environment and to honor those agents of change who advance the cause. In 1990, the Goldman Fund established the prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize, the equivalent of the Nobel Prize, but in the area of environmental protection. Through a competitive and collaborative process, it selects grassroots environmental activists from 6 continents and offers them the recognition they deserve for the work they do. The award includes $125,000 and an opportunity for these change agents to leverage their newfound fame. The prize has been an inspiration to environmentalists and to philanthropists. The prize winners have been inspirations to us all. One other very important note about Richard Goldman: while he graduated from the other school across the bridge, the one whose men's basketball team is not undefeated, I couldn't resist, he has adopted the school on whose soil we are sitting today and is one of the true Bear Cardinal hybrids in the Bay Area. Please welcome Richard Goldman. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to sunny California, where it rained up to a few days ago. When Jane asked me to sort of kick off with a statement this morning, she used a term which I'm not very good at. She said, "Give them hell." Well, I'll speak to a subject which is deep in my heart, and that is what philanthropy really means. And in simplest of terms, I refer to it as the art of giving, and nothing other than that. And 2 years ago, I spoke to this assemblage, and I spoke about this particular subject. Now, the way it all evolved was that I was getting an award a few years ago, and I was trying to think, well, what can I say to these people attending? And it's been on my mind that philanthropy is sometimes misused, the term that is, and sometimes abused. And so I just decided I'd talk about the subject. I didn't intend to go on a tour or anything of the kind. I just thought it was a good thing to speak out about and let the chips fall where they may. So what I spoke about then, for those who might have been present and forgot, or those who had not been, was a view of philanthropy based on what we do with our fund. And I really talked about 4 areas at the time. One of them is in giving overseas. I think in this country we're too often limiting our gifts to either local or maybe countrywide opportunities, but not enough money is going overseas. I'll only use as one example, the biggest foundation in the country today is giving primarily overseas, and I commend the Gates family for what they do. So that was one of the areas that I felt was important to mention in the meeting that took place. We do give overseas, but we don't give as much as we should, and we're thinking in terms of expanding upon that. Anyway, the next point I made was about endowments. And I broke them down into two categories, specific and perpetual. And I drew this distinction. If someone wants to give money to set up a chair in a school, it requires an endowment to support it, and I call that a specific endowment. The perpetual endowment is the one that I question, and that is when an organization, a university or whatever, builds an endowment which it gets so large that it's inconceivable to me how they can spend it in a reasonable time, and then they keep asking for more. And of course, the school I picked on the most is the one with the biggest endowment, and that's Harvard, which is back to maybe $20 billion, even after the market took a little bit of a downturn, and they're hammering for more money all the time. But on the other hand, I just heard in the last day or two that they've just established a policy so that any student whose parents have, I believe, an income of less than $40,000 a year gets a full scholarship. So that's a hopeful sign, and I'm very pleased to hear that that has occurred. The third concern I referred to was setting up foundations in perpetuity. And I speak only for ourselves. We have a fund that will terminate no later than 10 years after I pass away. And the funds that are still there will be distributed possibly partly to foundations that my children have established and maybe other places. But I don't think any foundation should be forever. I think that each generation should be able to develop its own style of giving and take on the responsibility. And if you think of the generation below mine, they probably are in better financial circumstance than our generation was at their age. So why should foundations think that they have to be there into the future when there are others that can take over? And the fourth, which seems to be the one area which has gotten the most attention from my comments, has to do with the subject of how much money we give away each year. And being that we have always been circumspect about giving away the 5%, but all in grants, subsequently, about 4 years ago, we decided that we would up the ante, and we now give away 10%. It's not a big deal, but you know, it sounds like a much bigger chore than it really is, and hopefully others will follow. And so those were the points I talked about. And by the way, in talking about them, as I mentioned at the beginning, these are things that we do ourselves. And I think that's what probably motivated me to talk to the subject. Now, the question that Jane asked me to make a few comments about is what's happened since the time I spoke to this assemblage 2 years ago. And as I said earlier, I'm not on the platform. I respond when people ask when I can, and it's amazing how often it occurs. And they really want me to talk about the 5% rule and how far it can go and how much more we can all do in relation to it. So the next time I'm speaking is later this month. The East Bay Community Foundation is having its annual meeting, and they asked me to come and talk about it. And I said to them, hey, I'm in the West Bay, you know, there's competition between Oakland and San Francisco. You got the wrong guy. And they said, no, we want you to come and speak to us on this. So I'll go, and we'll have fun, and hopefully we'll get something accomplished. And a few other things have happened which are kind of amazing to me. I never expected any of this to occur. One of them, I was called upon to comment on the Tom Brokaw News about a little over a year ago. And more recently, in the last few months, I was interviewed by Charlie Rose. And when I was talking with him, I made reference to the Ford Foundation, that a few years ago they spent a considerable amount of their 5% on other than just straight grants. And I thought, I'll never hear from them. They'd probably think I'm an ogre. But lo and behold, subsequently I got a letter from Susan Beresford, who is the director, complimenting me on what I had to say and indicating to me, and this is why I wanted to mention it to you, that in the last 2 years they've given over 5% and all in grants. So that made me feel mighty pleased to see that they had made that move. So I think there is a trend, and I think that it'll grow. And I think that we all of us that care about it just have to be prepared to speak to it. Now, the other thing that's occurred since I spoke here before is the action by the Congress on H.R. 7, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And I thought, wow, this is the House of Representatives meeting the challenge and making it clear to everybody that we, the country that has the most liberal program for giving, wanted to make sure that they follow the rules. And I thought, this is just right on. Then I learned that several of the foundations had hired a lobbyist to counteract it somewhat. That was a little disappointing, but as far as I know, it's still in process. I don't know when they're going to vote on it because, again, my only basic interest is that it's a good move being taken by in the Congress of the United States for the good of philanthropy. And now to bring it down to the current moment, and I said to Jane, I don't know if I should mention this. She said, well, the floor is yours, so I'm going to take a chance. I've been a registered Republican from the day I started, and for the first time in my life, I have declared to support the Democratic candidate for president. That's encouraging. At least I didn't hear too many boos, so that's okay. On the other hand, and I'll tell you the reason, with all the problems we're faced with, and God knows we have many, the one that has been most critical in my mind has been the attitude toward the environment. And we must overcome it. We're losing too much ground if we allow another 4 years. There's no question about it. So as I told Jane, I wasn't going to take too much of your time, but I did want to make that point, and I thank you for giving me the moment to say a few words to you, and I commend the World Affairs Council. This is fantastic to think that there are 390 representatives and that 75 had to be turned away. I give you, Jane, all the credit in the world for bringing this wonderful group of people together, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words.